We kick off the story right in the middle of some insane action. A massive dragon is looming over a group of adventurers who dared to challenge it. With a single sweep of its tail, the beast crushes the battlefield, threatening to turn anyone in its path into barbecue. Wielding two swords, a fierce warrior lands a blow right on the creature's snout. Next up, an adventurer unleashes a bolt of lightning magic from his blade. The dragon counters with a freezing spell shot straight toward the group. But a human sorceress quickly conjures a magical shield that protects her allies from harm. The pressure, however, is so intense that the barrier shatters, leaving the adventurers exposed. When the healer gets injured, one of her companions quickly shoves a potion down her throat, bringing her back into the fight. Taking advantage of the chaos, a cunning man uses a sly maneuver to slash the dragon's eye, sending the beast into a blind rage. The dual-bladed warrior uses her agility to deflect the crackling red beams away from her teammates, while the frontline fighter barks at his allies not to lose heart. After all, they are the Silver Wing, the strongest party in the world. The scene cuts to a round table crowded with high-level adventurers gathered for an emergency meeting. The drama starts right away with Vigo, level 99, pointing the finger at Dennis for their latest failed mission, blaming him for using the voice of dread, which supposedly scared off the cave dragon and cost them the victory. Dennis fires back, reminding everyone it was Captain Vigo himself who ordered him to use that ability. The leader, of course, denies it flat out. Frustrated, Dennis flashes back to the battle. Their mission was to defeat the cave dragon and recover its rare materials, but when the beast went berserk, winning became impossible. That's when the captain demanded Dennis use the voice of dread, and with that burst of intimidation, the cave dragon panicked and ran. The mission was a bust. Even so, Dennis knows that if they'd pressed on, plenty of them would have died. Still, Vigo insists he'd never give such an order and accuses Dennis of plotting to smear the group's reputation, like he's some kind of spy from a rival team. With that bullshit suspicion, the captain condemns Dennis to expulsion. Seeing that none of his other teammates speak up, Dennis realizes they all agree. Vigo sneers that a mere cook like Dennis never deserved to be in the group anyway. And that's enough to make Dennis rise from his seat and unleash a surge of power in front of the leader. Vigo doesn't back down. In his mind, Silver Wing is only for the most qualified warriors, and even if Dennis is level 99, he's still just a cook. So, with all that said, Dennis backs off, accepts his expulsion, and leaves without another word. A few days later, Dennis is packing up to leave the capital when a little girl bumps into him and accidentally lets go of her balloon. She's crushed. It was a gift from her mother. So Dennis leaps up onto the fountain obelisk in the square, grabs the balloon, returning it to her and lighting up her world, before watching her run back to her mom. He tells her, "If something matters to you, don't let it slip away so easily." Watching his former teammate from a high window, Vigo decides it's finally time to set his plan into motion. Back to Dennis as he's leaving through the city gates. He's stopped by a former party member, Katie, the dual-bladed warrior. She rushes after him, desperate to understand why he was kicked out. According to her, if Dennis leaves, nobody will be able to make those secret potions or whip up the delicious food only he knows how to cook. Dennis shrugs it off, insisting they'll find someone better. But Katie is adamant. Since Dennis joined, their dungeon runs have skyrocketed in efficiency. And that's the real reason Silver Wing now sits atop the adventurer rankings. It's not his fault the others don't recognize what he brings to the table. And if he insists on leaving for good, she at least wants him to cook dinner and prep some meals to tide them over. Dennis complains that all she thinks about is food, but Katie grows serious and asks what he'll do next. He says he's opening a restaurant. He's finally going to cook for real. Katie's crushed. After all, she was the one who invited Dennis to join Silver Wing in the first place, and he thanks her for that. Thinking to himself, Dennis knows he and Katie have always gotten along. Vigo, on the other hand, is clearly interested in her, and that probably influenced his decision to get rid of the cook. As a last-ditch effort, the vice captain orders Dennis to return to the team right now. But even without a response, Dennis knows his adventuring days are over. On the bright side, his new life as a chef is just beginning. Without wasting time, he heads to another city and is instantly captivated by a state-of-the-art refrigerator in the marketplace, an absolute must-have for any real restaurant. He's dying to take it home, but first checks his guide for ex-adventurers on how to open a restaurant, making sure it's really a necessary expense. According to the book, the best approach is to minimize costs wherever possible. That convinces Dennis to skip the purchase for now and rely on his ice magic instead. Leaving the shop, the would-be entrepreneur decides to follow his guide step by step, getting pumped about launching his new business. Circling the marketplace, he keeps these tips in mind. Buy a cheap, abandoned building and renovate it. Build good relationships with your suppliers. After a long afternoon of shopping and research, Dennis can feel his dream coming alive, getting closer by the minute. He's almost ready, but reading a little further in the guide, he realizes doing everything alone is crucial, but customers matter just as much. So Dennis decides it's time to hire someone. In the middle of all this, he notices a man out on the street, drawing a crowd as he boasts about his hand-picked goods of unparalleled quality. But the star attraction is a little girl who, according to the merchant, was once the daughter of a great noble house. Her parents had lost a power struggle and been cast out. Some in the crowd wonder if the girl is truly a noble, or if that's just the merchant's ploy to drive up her price. Dennis, for his part, could only think how much he wished he could help her. But he couldn't save everyone. If he tried to right every injustice in the world, he surely wouldn't survive. It's messed up, but it's the truth. Suddenly, the girl meets the cook's eyes, and in that look, he's transported back to his own childhood, when he wandered the streets alone and abandoned. An opening bid of 300,000 piece kicks off the auction, but the price rises fast, shooting up to 800,000 in no time. The merchant is about to close the deal when Dennis speaks up, offering 1 million. But then the refrigerator vendor butts in, raising the bid to 1.5 million. He's desperate to take this cute little girl home and take good care of her. People around them whisper in concern. The vendor has offered so much for the girl, and everyone knows he's a depraved creep. God only knows what he'd do to an innocent child. Not wanting to give up, Dennis offers 2 million, but the creep counters with 3. The bidding war spirals higher and higher, seeming to have no end, until, cut to the next scene, Dennis manages to buy the girl, trading away almost every coin he had. Still, he can't have the girl wandering around in rags, so he takes her to a shop and buys her a dress that, according to the shopkeeper, matches her hair perfectly. Later that afternoon, the two of them are walking side by side down the street. Suddenly, the girl stops in her tracks and stands still for several seconds, ignoring Dennis's calls. Without a word, she starts walking again, leaving Dennis completely at a loss for what to do with this child. As she shuffles along, head down, the girl suddenly looks up and realizes she's lost sight of her new master. In a flash, she's nearly run over by a passing cart and bumps into a rough-looking man. Moments later, she does the same to an elderly lady who snaps at her with open disdain. Each encounter makes the child feel as if she's trapped in a living nightmare surrounded by hostile strangers, a helpless creature among wolves. That's when Dennis finds her and confesses how worried he was, apologizing for walking too fast. Back at the house Dennis had just purchased, the girl asks why he bought her. Dennis scratches his head, explaining that she reminded him of something from long ago. He asks what he should call her and she replies, slave. Not liking that one bit, Dennis insists on calling her Atelier. He introduces himself, full of enthusiasm. She asks what she's supposed to do, and Dennis tells her she doesn't have to do anything. She can use the upstairs however she likes, or she's free to leave if she wants. After all, from this moment on, she's a free person. Later, the cook does what he does best, prepares a meal fit for his new housemate. While he's working in the kitchen, the girl remains quiet and withdrawn. Besides being a talented cook, Dennis also uses a bit of magic to enhance the meal, giving it a special touch. It's this bit of magic that finally makes Atelier's eyes light up for the first time since she arrived. The aroma is so enchanting she feels like she's floating on air. When she opens her eyes again, a beautiful plate of food sits before her. Dennis sits beside her, and the two of them give thanks for the meal. The girl takes her first bite and instantly falls in love with the flavor, eating as if she can't get enough. Once she's stuffed, Atelier suddenly bursts into tears. Watching her, Dennis realizes he can't imagine what this girl has been through. He decides not to push her with any questions. If she wants to talk, she will. Even if she's been hurt so deeply she thinks there's no hope left in the world, at least she'll have food to eat here. At one point, Dennis asks if Atelier liked the food, and she realizes she's got a mountain of rice stuck in her throat, prompting Dennis to come to her rescue once again. Over the next few days, Atelier gets used to the rhythms of daily life, pitching in around the house with cleaning and chores. Before long, she and Dennis are inseparable, sharing every little moment. One day, after finally finishing the restaurant sign, Dennis celebrates with a fist bump. Atelier hesitates, but when she finally returns the gesture, she feels, for the first time, a sense of belonging and camaraderie with this young man who's done so much for her. And so, at last, the adventurer's restaurant opens its doors, and Dennis wants Atelier to be the poster girl for the place. With everything decided, the owner takes one last look around. The menu's ready, the water's out, tables and chairs are set, the ingredients and kitchen tools are all in their place, everything's perfect. Nothing can stop this venture now. Fired up, Dennis promises himself that the very first customer will fall in love with his cooking, so much that they'll need to eat there 3 times a day. Well, as long as they pay, of course. Because our boy Dennis is dead broke and can't afford to give anyone free meals. Finally, the restaurant door swings open, and a knight in full armor stands silently in the entrance. Recalling page 68 of his guide, Dennis remembered that some customers just want to be left alone, preferring not to be bothered. So, even if this guy was armed to the teeth, the chef had to keep a friendly distance so as not to make things awkward. As the customer took a seat at the counter, the restaurant owner asked Atelier to fetch a glass of water. Dennis, keeping a close eye on the man, waited eagerly to see what he'd order. After all, this was his very first customer, and it had to be special. Instead of speaking, the customer simply pointed to a small portion of rice and a side of crystallized pickled plums on the menu. Honestly, Dennis was a bit let down. He'd imagined a warrior like this would go for a hearty meal to recover from some epic battle. Thinking out loud, he asked if the customer was the type to eat like a bird, and the guy shook his head. Dennis then asked if he was short on cash, and the warrior's reaction made it clear that was exactly the case. So, Dennis decided to ignore the order and whipped up a massive bowl of stew, wanting to treat his first customer right. Quickly, the customer made it clear in a distinctly feminine voice that she couldn't pay for the meal. That's when Dennis realized his customer was actually a woman. At that point, she had nothing left to hide. She took off her helmet and revealed who she really was. She explained, somewhat dejectedly, that she'd been kicked out of her adventuring party just for being a girl. A cruel twist, considering gender shouldn't matter when it comes to skill in battle. What a bunch of jerks. Her level wasn't that high, but probably around 23, which was respectable enough. Dennis agreed about the gender issue and thought she was mature enough at that level anyway. All fired up, the adventurer, Henrietta, went on about the vice captain of the strongest group out there, the Silver Wing, a female swordswoman known as Crimson Lightning, whose opening attack was always a critical hit. Clearly, a legendary warrior in her own right. Dennis knew all about her. He even muttered under his breath that she could be pretty ruthless sometimes. Not catching what he said, the adventurer explained that she was hiding her gender to get into another party, but it was tough, since she couldn't even speak without giving herself away. Things had gotten tight, she was running out of money and losing hope. Seeing this, Dennis set down the very first meal for his very first customer, hoping to lift her spirits. The girl was mesmerized by the dish's mouth-watering appearance. She reminded him she couldn't pay, but Dennis waved it off, telling her to eat before it got cold. With that, she dug in, and with every bite she seemed transported. When she finally finished, Dennis, delighted with how happy she looked, invited her to come back anytime. But as she'd already said, she couldn't afford daily meals at a restaurant. So Dennis made her a promise. He'd spread the word that a female swordswoman was looking for a team, and in the meantime, she could eat there for free until she found a job. The offer left her speechless. After serving his very first customer, word got out, and more people started coming and falling in love with Dennis's cooking. Whether it was his fried rice or the wyvern pasta, they said the food was top-notch, and the poster girl was the cutest thing ever. Dennis laughed and told Atelier people were praising her, but she just stayed quiet, as if none of it concerned her, a reminder that her past had made her a lot tougher. Even an elderly couple praised her service, but Atelier still didn't know how to respond. When one of the men's group remarked that this was the perfect meal before heading off to a dungeon, Dennis realized they were adventurers too. He asked if they'd be interested in adding a female swordswoman to their team. One of them said she could join them the very next day. They were actually looking for someone with more firepower. Later that afternoon, when the girl returned to the restaurant, she was amazed that Dennis had found her a new party so quickly. She promised she'd pay him back every cent from her first paycheck, even though he'd arranged it. Dennis told her to be careful. He didn't know those guys, but she was too excited to worry. Soon after, Dennis finished preparing her basilisk oyakodon, and she polished off the plate in no time, vowing with her mouth still full to pay him back for every last bite of that divine meal. Dennis asked her not to talk with her mouth full, so she mumbled, with her mouth still full, how delicious the food was. After her meal, Dennis's first customer left, but she definitely wasn't the last. As the days went by, more and more people discovered Dennis's restaurant. One night, after closing, two girls stopped by and were just as captivated by the food. As he was getting ready to close up, Dennis asked Atelier to go fetch the store curtain. Meanwhile, listening in, Dennis overheard the blonde girl telling her friend that lately, some adventuring groups had been inviting women to join them only to do terrible things to them deep in dungeons. They'd take the women so far in that they couldn't find their way back, then abandon them after assaulting them. After pulling this a few times, these adventurers would move on to another city and repeat the cycle. Hearing all this, Dennis wondered if those criminals might have been the guys who came to his restaurant. The next day, Henrietta introduced herself to her new teammates. Across from her stood a brown-haired guy named Still, a light swordsman. To her right was Marmok, the healer. The red-haired archer was Hondok, and the hooded mage was Kalatoba. Technically, Still was the leader, but Henrietta could just relax. Soon enough, the group heads out on their first mission. Still says today's job will just be a simple gathering run. Henrietta asks what they'll be collecting, but the leader says they'll talk about it once they get there. With an awkward smile, she thinks to herself that she really just wanted to know beforehand, but she keeps quiet. Once inside the cave, Henrietta quickly proves she's anything but ordinary. With every enemy that appears, she takes them down in a new and creative way. Her teammates watch in awe, clapping and praising her performance, words that go straight to her head after how she was kicked out of her last group. Still, they say it's time to go even deeper, and for the first time, Henrietta feels like people are genuinely counting on her. After all, she's always been treated as the weak link just for being a woman. Now that things are different, Henrietta swears she'll give it everything she's got. The party presses on, delving into the most dangerous parts of the dungeon, until a silver golem appears. Henrietta doesn't hesitate, meeting it head-on and slicing off one of its arms in a single strike. Next, they face a massive worm, and Henrietta makes quick work of it, taking off its head without breaking a sweat. With each new stage, she becomes more and more determined. But all that drive eventually comes with a price. After so much fighting, Henrietta is finally exhausted. Even then, her teammates barely seem to notice, insisting they're almost at their destination. Left with no choice, she pushes herself onward. Finally, they reach a certain part of the labyrinth. Still explains that the glowing crystals scattered around are memory crystals, and that's what they came to collect. Henrietta, barely hanging on, nearly collapses. The leader tells Marmok to cast a healing spell on her. Instead, Marmok casts a spell that restricts her movements even more. Struggling, Henrietta tries to grab her sword, but Still steps on her hand and kicks it away. Now, with her body reeling from the stun effect, Henrietta is easy prey. Planting his foot on her, the team leader mocks how easy she was to fool. According to him, swordswomen are always the best targets. They're not as clever as mages and usually have the nicest bodies. The plan is to have their fun with her for an hour, then let her go. Just pure scum. Hearing all this, Henrietta can only regret not listening to Dennis. If she just paid more attention, she would have known something was wrong from the start. With that, the criminals start removing her armor, but suddenly, the sound of battle echoes through the cave. They panic. Still tells Handok to check it out, but the archer is immediately knocked aside by a blow that sends him flying. The source of the chaos steps forward, wearing a bag over their head and wielding 2 kitchen knives. The sheer fury makes the adventurers think a monster has come for them. Quickly, Still orders Marmok to use a detection spell, but it's useless against such a terrifying opponent. In a flash, the stranger attacks Still, hurling him against the cave wall with bone-crushing force as Henrietta lies helpless. The masked figure absolutely wrecks the criminals. Watching through blurry eyes, Henrietta thinks the person moves just like a master chef, but she passes out before she can make sense of it all. In the next scene, Henrietta recounts what happened. When she woke up, she was at the Adventurers Guild, unable to thank the mysterious, muscular man with the kitchen knives. Her attackers had been knocked out, tied up, and left at the dungeon's entrance. The guild investigated and found out they were wanted criminals. After all she's been through, it almost feels like a bad dream. Still, it's clear she needs to be much more careful about who she adventures with. Dennis, meanwhile, says it was his fault too, much to her surprise. In his view, he should have done some background checks. Embarrassed, Henrietta insists it wasn't his fault, until her stomach lets out a loud growl. Dennis asks what she wants for dinner. She remembers she's still broke, but as always, the chef doesn't care, he just wants to see his partner with a full belly. In that case, Henrietta asks for the supreme steak combo. Dennis jokes that it's the most expensive dish, but laughs it off and tells Atelier to close up for the night, now that their guest ordered the biggest meal. The two of them are going to have to eat it together. Just then, those two girls from the other day come back and order. A little while later, Dennis finishes Henrietta's supreme steak and brings another portion to Atelier, who's just as floored by the dish. The other customers ask why the chef wasn't open yesterday, so he explains he had a few things to take care of. Hearing this, Henrietta starts to get suspicious, picturing that same bag from the day before over Dennis' head, which fits just a little too perfectly. Right after, someone opens the restaurant door. With a smile, Chef Dennis welcomes the newest customer to the Adventurers restaurant. The next day, back at the restaurant, Henrietta tries to get the owner's attention to have a chat, but he's so focused on his work that he practically cuts her off, just to ask what she'll have today. After thinking for a bit, the knight orders the sorcery ramen. And only after she places her order does he show that he was, in fact, listening. Henrietta wanted to know if she should go back to hiding her gender in future adventures. The cook, our boy Dennis, tells it like it is. She should do things her own way, because that's the only way she'll ever be truly herself. Hearing those words, Henrietta rushes to the back of the restaurant and takes off all her armor. Before coming back out, she reflects that when people make mistakes, they start to fear making new ones and sometimes lose sight of who they really are. But, instead of giving in to that, the girl steps out in her true outfit, allowing herself to show her real self. Seeing this, Atelier, the waitress, gives her a thumbs up, and Dennis smiles in approval. Meanwhile, someone approaches the restaurant door. Inside, the warrior is savoring every bite of her noodles, her happiness written all over her face. After all, Dennis's advice had truly touched her heart. Words from a skilled chef just hit different. Speaking of which, Dennis suddenly changes his tone. Since she managed to eat everything in sight, he wants to know if she plans on joining another group and getting back to work. Henrietta tries to stall, so the chef gets straight to the point, pressing her about the tab she owes him. At that exact moment, a very young person walks in, takes a seat at the counter, and opens the menu. The owner greets the newcomer, though he has no idea if it's a boy, a girl, or maybe both. For her part, Henrietta can only think about how beautiful the child is, avoiding any pronouns. Dennis asks to be notified when the customer is ready to order, and the kid asks what's good to eat. Everything, Dennis replies, but the child thinks that's about the most useless answer possible. Unfazed, the chef suggests a vritra katsudon, but the kid isn't in the mood to down a bowl of rice. Henrietta suggests spakatsu, which is a pasta dish, but the child thinks that sounds too heavy. The warrior tries to offer something else, but this kid was cocky as hell. And Dennis, just like me, loses his patience and nearly snaps at the customer, forcing Henrietta to hold him back. Atelier, meanwhile, nudges the kid and says fried rice is the way to go in situations like this. With the choice made, Dennis gets to work with his usual cheerful flair, whipping up a meal with his signature magical touches. Soon, he serves up a gorgeous plate of shrimp fried rice. Without hesitation, the kid grabs a shrimp from the top and instantly falls in love with the taste. Afterwards, Dennis asks if there was something the kid wanted to talk about, since they walked in looking like someone who needed to vent. The boy confides that everyone around him is useless, mentally stunted, only ever thinking about finishing whatever quest is at hand and collecting a handout for payment. With zero ambition to become a top-tier group, that's what he hates the most. Those losers just pretending to be adventurers for show, which is unforgivable. The problem is, when the kids spoke this truth to their old group, they got kicked out. But he's real about it and says that's exactly what he wanted, because no way could he stay in a team of such shallow-minded people. Instead, one day he'll join the Silver Wing and become the greatest magic user there is. Not really in the mood for this conversation, especially since he used to be part of that crappy group. Dennis just tells the egotistical kid to tone it down a bit, or he'll risk ending up alone, because what makes a real adventurer is the group, not just individual talent. The mage agrees, as long as the group is strong enough to keep up. After chowing down, the kid pays and says he can keep the change even though he'd already paid the exact amount. Before leaving, he introduces himself as Vivia Strange, making it clear he'll be back for more of that fried rice. And wouldn't you know it, he's back the next day, waiting while the chef fries up some shrimp. This time, Vivia announces he's decided to join the area's strongest group, the Night Mist Troop. After all, when you're as strong as Vivia, you end up being pretty populous. Dennis corrects him, saying the word is popular, and asks if the team is really up to Vivia's level. He's not sure, but he trusts in his own skills. Dennis notes that this kid really has some spirit. Soon the meal is served, and once again enchanted by the food, the short little mage wonders aloud if he'll get a cool nickname when he joins the Silver Wing, something like the Dark Mage. Dennis thinks to himself that it's more likely they'll call him Fried Rice Boy. But even if Vivia is egocentric, the chef admires his drive to get better. Dennis asks when his first job with the new team will be, and Vivia explains that tomorrow they'll be gathering rare materials on the 5th floor of the dungeon. Showing some concern, Dennis uses his scan ability and finds out Vivia is level 17, which is really high for someone his age, but the recommended level for entering the 5th floor is at least 30. With that in mind, Dennis asks if that's not a bit deep for him, but Vivia is sure it'll all work out, especially since the elite members will be supporting him. Hearing this, Dennis figures the kid probably read about advanced spells and now believes he can pull them off in a real battle. According to the chef, a person's level is basically a measure of the number and quality of the skills they've acquired. So, if Vivia really did master several advanced skills, it's strange that his level hasn't increased. With that in mind, Dennis tries to get the mage to see his own limits. But Vivia insists the chef could never understand what it's like to enter a dungeon, as it's a feeling only adventurers get. But our boy Dennis remembers all too well the last time he made it to the 37th floor. The next day, as Dennis is walking through the market with Atelier, he can't help but worry about Vivia. He even wants to stop the kid, but he knows that in the world of adventurers, you have to take responsibility for yourself. Suddenly, two passing adventurers start talking. One asks if that kid, Vivia, is going to be alright. The other shrugs it off, saying that's just how they do things and that Captain Hopper sent the kid to the 5th floor alone, just to see if he'd survive. It's a kind of rite of passage where most people end up dead. Hearing that, Dennis grabs both guys and drags them into an alley to get some answers. Thinking they're hotshots because they're members of the Night Mist Troop, the two go on the attack, but Dennis absolutely wrecked those dudes without even breaking a sweat. He heads back to Atelier and sighs, saying they'll have to close the restaurant again today. She just nods and tells him to be careful, kind of understanding what's about to happen. The scene changes and we cut to Vivia, who's learning the hard way that real life is no walk in the park. He's running for his life, trying to shake off the monsters chasing him. But due to exhaustion and nerves, he ends up falling, and his foot gets caught in something that looks like a magically enchanted vine. Terrified, he tries to remember the spell to break enchantments, but he's so scared that his mind just blue screens. He thinks about how he read the books so carefully and all that, but life is like that, my friends. Training is one thing, but a real fight is another. As the goblins close in, he's already theorizing about how he's gonna bite the dust. But a spell reaches him, and when we see the goblins get to him, Vivia is no longer there, because a girl has hidden him in a hole in the wall. Vivia thanks her for the rescue and is impressed that she knows such an ancient spell. Even so, the girl makes it clear now's not the time to feel safe, they need to find a way out of there. Her name is Cynthia, and unfortunately, she was also abandoned by her group. She mentions that while they were running from monsters, she fell into a trap and no one came to save her. Vivia says that's horrible, but with those pompous speeches he was giving at the restaurant, it wouldn't be a stretch to think he'd agree with that kind of attitude. Cynthia says that no matter what she does, she feels like she was never even good enough for the basics. Vivia admits that he won't be rescued either and that maybe he was a little too arrogant. The two find comfort in their similar situations, and just like that, a bond forms between them. Faced with danger, Vivia comes up with a plan. He'll act as bait to draw the creatures away, giving Cynthia a chance to escape. Cynthia completely disagrees, but Vivia insists he wouldn't even be alive if it weren't for her. And for the first time in his life, Vivia Strange is ready to die for someone else. He spent his whole life being selfish, but Cynthia saved him and comforted him, and now, with all his heart, he just wants her to get out of this alive. So, the young mage gathers his courage and faces the goblins, casting his spell, Palm, which is literally a giant hand that acts as a barrier. But the goblins manage to force their way through and finally surround him. And just then, for the citizens' luck, Dennis comes crashing down from above, smashing the goblins. With a giant frying pan he summoned with a spell called Steel. Thinking it's another monster, Vivia starts firing off a bunch of palms. But when he hears the monster's voice, he realizes it's just the chef. Dennis pulls off the bag from his head, smacks Vivia for doing something so reckless, and tells him it's time to go. Vivia runs to find the friend he made in the dungeon, but when they get to the hole in the wall, they discover that Cynthia was, in fact, just a skeleton wearing the girl's clothes the whole time. Holy crap, man, not even the future saw that one coming. I was shocked. The next day, at the Adventurers Guild, Vivia and Dennis find out the girl's name was Cynthia Dread, a 16-year-old mage who got separated from her party on the 5th floor of the dungeon 13 years ago. I had to swallow hard at that reveal. I felt bad for the girl. They then visit the Adventurers' cemetery to pay their respects. Dennis mentions he's heard stories like this before, where the spirits of adventurers who died in labyrinths sometimes help people who get trapped there. As they placed flowers on the tombstone, Vivia breaks down in tears and promises he'll always come back to visit his friend and that he'll become the #1 mage in the world to save people like Cynthia. As they're leaving the cemetery, Dennis tries to cheer him up, promising to make him a big plate of fried rice, but Vivia is still visibly shaken. So the chef gives him a hard slap on the back and tells him not to stay down for too long, or Cynthia's spirit will never be free. Annoyed, Vivia says he already knows that, but he just wanted to let himself be sad, at least for a little while. Suddenly, he feels the girl's same magical current flow through him once again. He thinks to himself that, in the old days, whenever people experienced something mysterious, they called it magic, and if that was true, then Cynthia Dread was certainly a mage. Meanwhile, at the city's bell tower, a girl stood at the edge about to jump, wondering, why did things have to end up like this? We start with a flashback, where we see someone calling out for backhell, wanting to know when she'd finally fix the reports she was supposed to turn in. Head down, the poor girl just mutters an apology, but of course, that wasn't enough for him. Meanwhile, the other guys in the room just laugh and make fun of her, as the girl tries to explain that the numbers for the mission reward payouts don't add up. Hearing this, her boss smacks her on the head with the stack of papers and tells her she'd better redo everything until the numbers match, doubting that she's really level 32 at all. Because of that scolding, Bakhel is stuck at work long after everyone else has left, trying to sort out the mess. She notices that the number of collected items is off, which is why the reward calculations don't match up. In her mind, it had to be someone who'd been there longer making these mistakes, but she was still the one stuck fixing them. And to top it all off, she had to get up at 3 in the morning for a dawn mission, and she hadn't had a bite to eat all day. In other words, she was screwed. Even though she doubted any restaurants would still be open, her hunger was so intense that she decided to take a chance and check if a new place she'd heard about might still be serving. When she gets there, Atelier was just packing things up to close, and for a second, Bachel's hopes went down the drain. But then the girl asks if she's a customer, giving her a chance to slip in at the last minute. After that, Atelier asks Dennis to take care of one more customer. The cook just looks on intently, while Henrietta and Vivia mention that it's rare to see Atelier ask for anything. Embarrassed, Bakhel sits at the counter and, after glancing at the menu, orders the daily special. While Vivia is talking to Henrietta about cutting her bangs, which she mentions she didn't even notice, Bakhel finds herself soaking in the cozy atmosphere of the place, which makes her heart feel lighter. The truth is, she usually spent her rare days off sleeping with no friends to hang out with, and she realized it'd be nice to come to a warm place like this more often. After a while, Dennis brings out the special, and the new customer stares at the fried food and the unfamiliar sauce. She'd never seen anything like it. The moment she tastes it, her jaw drops at what the chef can do, because she'd never eaten anything so delicious in her entire life. Agreeing that this place was a real gem, Henrietta lists off another 15 dishes for her to try. Vivia jokes that his friend has already tried everything there, to which she replies, "Well, what else do you expect from the restaurant's first customer?" Our boy Dennis questions if she means the first freeloader, mentioning that while he gave her an inch, she went nuts and took a whole mile. Henrietta grumbles that Vivia is also unemployed, but the chef points out that the mage at least pays for his meals with his savings, earning him the title of traitor from Henrietta. With that, Bakhel bursts into a laugh so hard that she starts to cry, and everyone turns to look at her. She apologizes for it, while thinking to herself that a place in the world filled with good food and good people really does exist. But every day she was trapped in a true hell disguised as a job, where everyone hated her for no reason and she had to work late into the night. She reflects that she wakes up every morning wishing she could just disappear, though it hadn't always been that way. Man, I feel so bad for this girl. This moment was genuinely sad. We then get a flashback that shows her past. When she was younger, people saw her as a promising mage, praised by everyone in her community. She was so talented that when she came of age, the whole village pooled their resources to sponsor her studies in the big city. Things started off well, and Bakhel skipped a grade because of her remarkable abilities. She was even offered a position as a teacher. She was brimming with confidence and even joined the city's strongest adventurer group to earn money and give back to those who had supported her. With that memory in her mind, she leaves the restaurant after only a single bite. Everyone inside worries about her, and Vivia mentions that she's part of the Night Mist troupe, the same group that once left him for dead. The others quickly urge Dennis to do something, but the chef just shrugs, saying he's just a cook and all he could do was feed people. Bakhel, it seemed, would have to help herself. The scene changes, and at 3 in the morning her alarm goes off. Though she hadn't managed to sleep at all, exhausted, she dozes off for just a moment and ends up running late. In a rush, she grabs her things and hurries to meet her teammates, who are furious about her lack of responsibility. Even so, they set out for the mission. In the chaos, they're ambushed by a werewolf that knocks one of the team members to the ground. Bakhel reacts instantly with a blast, taking down the monster. Worried, she rushes to check on her injured teammate, only to be shoved aside by the very man she just saved. After the mission, the young mage wanders through the city streets, weighed down by sadness. Her teammates had the audacity to blame her for what happened in the dungeon and said horrible things to her. Nearby, Henrietta and Vivia are walking, talking about food. They then spot Bakhel, head down as she passes. As the scene evolves, we see that it connects to the end of the previous episode, where Bakhel is at the top of the bell tower, standing at the edge, wondering how her life came to this. Vivia and Henrietta had followed her, realizing things were much worse than they thought. And just as the bell begins to ring, Bakhel jumps. Henrietta leaps after her, grabbing the girl, while Vivia casts a cushioning spell near the ground, turning their fall into a soft landing. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Atelier steps out of the bath and immediately complains there aren't any towels. Which means, of course, she walks out dripping wet and completely naked, leaving Dennis scrambling, desperate to find anything for the little girl to dry herself off with. Moments later, Vivia and Henrietta show up with Bakhel. Our protag takes one look at the situation and comes to a conclusion. The little mage is dealing with an illness of the mind. Vivia can't help but jab that Henrietta will never suffer from anything like that. When he sees the girl laugh, Dennis realizes just how well those two troublemakers are already getting along. Henrietta wants to know how Bakhel can be cured, and the chef explains the only real remedy is plenty of rest. Vivia isn't convinced that'll ever happen. After all, Bakhel is part of the Night Mist squad. And so, Dennis promises to have a talk with the crew. That night, he welcomes the squad's members into his restaurant. Their disgusting leader, Captain Hopper, is quick to apologize that one of his members is causing so much trouble. Dennis, for his part, insists he's the one who should be apologizing, since he knocked a few of them out. Hopper ignores him, saying he heard the food here is top-notch. Dennis can tell this guy isn't giving an inch and quickly sizes him up, level 51, way out of the league of any average adventurer. No wonder his squad is #1 in the city. As for Bakhel, Dennis explains she's safe and resting, but she's in no condition to work and should be released from the group. Hopper says that's easier said than done. After all, they have custody of the girl. With that, another member tosses Bachel's contract onto the table. Dennis is furious when he sees what she signed up for: impossible conditions and an inhuman workload, especially for someone her age. When the others mock his concern, the chef loses his cool and says flat out they're nothing but a gang of cruel con artists. Hearing that, Hopper crushes his mug in his hand and says this city is their turf, and they are the law around here. If the cook doesn't want trouble, he'd better hand Bakhel over. At the same time, Bakhel wakes up feeling miserable, wondering why her friends didn't just let her die. Atelier calmly tells her she's free to die if that's what she wants. After all, she herself had thought about ending her life once, after everything she'd lost. She'd been banished and sold as a slave, and that's when the dark thoughts started. But she didn't bite the dust because, somehow, there were still wonderful things in life. First things first, she tells her friend, have something delicious to eat, and only then decide what you really want. If you still want to die after that, then maybe there's nothing else to be done. Either way, Atelier will respect her choice, though she'd much rather her friend choose to live. Outside the room, Dennis asks Hopper if he thinks he's the king or something. Hopper shrugs, saying it's pretty much like that. After all, in every dungeon city, the strongest group holds the real power, and the Silverwing group is a perfect example. Dennis points out that Hopper's bunch is nothing like them, but Hopper disagrees. Just then, Katie, also known as the Crimson Lightning, bursts in, looking very happy to see her teammate again. Dennis tries to get her to come back later, but she pouts, saying she came all this way just to see him. Hopper can't help but notice the crimson armor, the red swords, and the fiery hair, not to mention the insignia on her coat. And that's when it hits the bastard. He's looking at the vice captain of Silverwing, better known as the Crimson Swiftblade. At that instant, Hopper starts getting seriously nervous about how close Katie and Dennis seem. After Dennis convinces her to wait a bit, he asks if there's a way to get the girl out of the squad without causing a scene. Katie immediately interrupts again, scooping Vivia up for a hug like he's a stuffed animal. Dennis has to remind her that he's a guy, while the young mage asks how she knows the chef. She cheerfully reveals that Dennis used to be part of Silverwing, and that the two of them were basically partners. A revelation that hits the entire restaurant like a bombshell, leaving everyone stunned. Hopper's eyes go wide when he realizes where Dennis came from. He finally understands that making an enemy out of this guy is a terrible idea. With that in mind, he orders a subordinate to burn Bachel's contract, officially releasing her from the squad, and then storms out of the place, fuming. Katie remarks that things could have gotten ugly. After all, She's furious that someone messed with her Dennis. He mentions that he doesn't remember ever belonging to her. Full of anger, she asks if he wants her to kick that idiot out of town, and Dennis knows she has the power to do it, but tells her to calm down. Leaving all that aside, the chef asks his old friend what she wants to eat. At that exact moment, Atelier shows up to order the daily special for Backhel, who's finally out of bed. Dennis smiles as Atelier pulls out a chair for the girl, and Katie orders the same dish for herself. Once the food is ready, both of them get their meals. Katie dives right in, no hesitation, and shows Backhel that eating can, in fact, save a life. Then, after Dennis reminds her that she's still there, the girl snaps out of it and tries the house's signature fried shrimp with the special sauce. Her reaction: it's like she died and went to heaven, only to come back after tasting something so incredible. And from that moment on, she just couldn't stop eating, savoring every bite with pure delight. After her trip, Katie arrives at her group's base, where her teammates are gossiping about Captain Vigo's foul mood and how the squad's missions have been going from bad to worse lately. Lost in thought, she accidentally bumps right into the captain himself. Vigo shoots a death glare at the gossiping pair and sends them off on the day's mission, then turns to Katie, mentioning he heard she went to see Dennis. She explained she was missing her friend's cooking and that when she tasted last night's dish, she was so happy that she invited our protagonist to come back to Silverwing. According to her, the whole group has been on the verge of collapse since he left, but Dennis obviously isn't interested and consequently won't be coming back. Katie, persistent, continues, saying he was the backbone of the support team, and now that he's gone, the members who relied on him are getting more and more irritated with Vigo, who's done nothing to fill the gap. However, our dear Dennis couldn't care less about that and just says that's water under the bridge, and because of that, he's not going back and is very happy with his current life. Sure, his customers might be a bit unhinged and even not pay their bills sometimes, right, Henrietta? But he's happy, he likes the restaurant, and he's not planning on returning to that stressful team anytime soon. In the end, Dennis makes it clear he's a cook, not an adventurer. One way or another, Vigo also makes it clear that he doesn't want Dennis back on the team and orders Katie to stay away from him. Upset, she can't understand how things got to this point, but the captain doesn't say another word and ends the conversation right then and there. Meanwhile, Dennis's restaurant is absolutely packed. Customers are crowding in, putting his cooking speed to the test. At the same time, Atelier proves she's not slacking off, jotting down every order while dashing back and forth. Vivia comments that the restaurant is finally thriving, and Henrietta agrees it's hard to resist the chef's food. Suddenly, the mage is served by Backhel and is surprised to see her working there. From now on, she's going to live and help out at the restaurant, and she shows all her gratitude to her friends for always stopping by when she wasn't feeling well. Vivia is happy for her but points out that she shouldn't push herself so hard. Embarrassed, she admits she only feels at ease when she's working. Besides, her mini-senpai Atelier is always by her side, come what may. Dennis shows up and says the two of them make a great team, which Henrietta agrees with. He then serves up the grub for the duo, and as soon as they take a bite, the reaction is exactly what you'd expect. They worship those shrimp as if they were gods. Henrietta perfectly understands why the restaurant is so packed now and is even proud to be a regular customer. But our protag corrects her, saying she's not a regular customer, but a freeloader, killing her vibe on the spot. Vivia is shocked to realize his friend still hasn't paid the chef. She tries every excuse, explaining how hard it's been to find a job, but anyway, the chef gives her a threatening look and makes it clear that if she keeps dodging the bill, things are going to get heated. Vivia tries to change the subject, pointing out how many customers there are and asking if it's tough to serve everyone at once. Dennis praises Atelier for keeping everything running smoothly. Dennis then freezes and drops a bowl on the floor. Vivia asks if he's okay. Our protagonist just replies with a question, asking if he can stop by the restaurant on his next day off, because he needs some advice. Henrietta jumps in, offering her own advice, but he cuts her off immediately. Without understanding what's going on, Vivia agrees to the invitation. On the other hand, we see that Henrietta is going through some tough times. Besides being out of a job and broke, she also has to take cold showers because she doesn't have money to pay for hot water. She thinks to herself that she needs to get some money to pay Dennis and starts to wonder if the advice Vivia wants is about banning her, mentioning that she needs to do something urgently. The scene changes once more, and now we're on the day off, where Vivia goes to the restaurant and hears from Dennis that Atelier seems to have a boyfriend. Completely freaking out, he explains that he started giving her an allowance recently, and after that, she's been going out all the time. He just can't handle the idea that she might be involved with some random guy. And to make matters worse, Dennis confides in a panic that he saw her with a boy and is now pounding the table, demanding to know if that kid is his adopted daughter's boyfriend. Vivia tries to calm him down, suggesting he just ask her instead of overthinking it, but the reality is, Dennis can't bring himself to talk about it. And completely freaking out, he just says that the least the kid could do is show up and give his father-in-law a box of sweets or something. And since he didn't do that, it proves he's weak and shallow. And if that's the case, Dennis won't accept it, because he'll only accept the guy if he's level 80 or higher. At that exact moment, Atelier comes in, asking what they're talking about, and Dennis almost falls over from panic. Vivia, showing a bit more maturity, tries to play it off, saying they were just chatting about cooking. The little girl gets excited and says she wants to learn too. To keep up the act, Dennis tells her to wash her hands and get ready to start learning. Once that's done, he brings them to the counter to teach them the right way to cut onions. Their eyes start to water, and even though Vivia is also suffering a lot, the chef's attention is entirely on the girl, which the mage notices is completely disproportional treatment. As the cook watches the girl cutting onions, he remembers the day he learned to cut onions from his mom. On that occasion, she noticed he was secretly using a skill to keep his eyes from burning, something his mom found out because she always knew everything he did. Brought back to reality by the girl, Dennis realizes she's dropped eggshells into the bowl and then helps her do it the right way. As things unfold, we see the three of them sharing this team moment, even strengthening their bonds, until finally, the dish is ready. At that moment, the cook praises Atelier for her achievement. On the other side, the poor Vivia holds his plate like a trophy and brags about his own skills, only to get annoyed when he realizes the chef only has eyes for his pseudo-daughter. At that exact moment, the city bell rings, and without missing a second, Atelier slips out of the restaurant, saying she's going for a walk but dodging any specific questions. Just then, Backhel wakes up, so Dennis tells her to eat the 2 katsudons that are ready. Vivia reminds everyone that one of them is his, but Dennis cuts him off and hands Backhel the shopping list. Confused, she asks if Dennis isn't going with her, but he explains that he and Vivia have a little something to take care of right now. Then, Henrietta bursts into the restaurant to announce she's passed a test to join an adventurer group, but the chef interrupts her mid-sentence and asks if she'd like to go shopping with Backhel. Eager to prove she can be useful, she says yes on the spot, and with that, Dennis bolts out the door, dragging Vivia along with him. At the market, the chef and the mage spot Atelier saying goodbye to an old lady. Vivia grumbles that they shouldn't be stalking the girl like this, but the cook shrugs it off. After all, he's her protector. But if that's really the case, Vivia asks why he doesn't just go talk to his daughter. Dennis admits he can't, so the mage declares that he's acting like a stalker. Ignoring the young man's words, he turns the kid's head towards Atelier and points out the last thing he wanted to see, his adopted daughter chatting with a boy at a market stall. Dennis is about to explode, while Vivia points out that he doesn't even know if that boy is her boyfriend. Still ignoring his friend, Dennis keeps a close eye as Atelier is led by the boy into a jewelry store. Now Dennis is really freaking out, convinced she's going to buy a wedding ring. And amidst the chaos, Vivia has an idea. After their errands, Backhel notices her friend looks worried. Henrietta says she can't stop thinking about her debt to the chef. Backhel doesn't understand why the adventurer can't save any money. Henrietta explains that, besides equipment maintenance, she's always getting hurt and spending money on potions. Now that money is tight, she really wants to find a way to repay Dennis. Backhel, in turn, praises her friend's character for caring so much and is rewarded with a sincere hug. At that moment, the girls overhear 2 men gossiping about the captain of the Night Mist troop. According to the rumors, the guy was humiliated by a restaurant manager who, as it turns out, is a former Silverwing. In the end, the 2 hope that Scum doesn't try to seek revenge. Hearing this, Bacchel and Henrietta exchange a tense glance. Meanwhile, Vivia borrows a megaphone from a nearby shop. But it's not just any megaphone, it's a magical item. With this in hand, the duo manages to sneak close to a jewelry store window to eavesdrop on what Atelier is saying. The first thing they hear her say is, "It's beautiful. I love it. A treasure for life. Atelier was so happy to have met you." Naturally, Dennis completely loses his mind hearing this and has a meltdown right there in the street. And while that's happening, a woman's purse is stolen by a thief using wind magic. So, Dennis quickly pulls himself together to see what happened. Meanwhile, the thief is gloating about how easily he took the old lady's money, but he's not prepared for a man sprinting toward him at full speed with a child slung over his shoulder. The thief is level 30 and thinks that's more than enough to shake off this nuisance, but quickly realizes he's in trouble when he sees his pursuer keeping up without even using magic. Trying to get away, he uses his wind magic to leap over rooftops, trying to ditch Dennis. But our protagonist simply powers through, copying the thief's path and blocking his escape. Even so, he admits that a little magic would come in handy, so Vivia casts the only spell he knows, the palm, which creates a hand-shaped trampoline, allowing the cook to boost his speed even more, to the terror of the child hanging on. Still, Vivia manages to keep casting palms, keeping the wild chase going at full throttle. At one point, Dennis almost catches the fugitive, but the guy was skilled and managed to escape. To make matters worse, he even had the audacity to taunt the chef. And that's when Dennis takes it personally and gets back to the chase. And as they're literally flying through the market, they spot Henrietta and Bacchel, and they end up bumping into the thief. Well, that seals his fate, because she goes up to him and uses a move called Grosse La Dance. And that's more than enough to capture the fugitive. After that, the warrior sees Dennis arrive, and he thanks her for her help, saying she's the best. And obviously, that ends up being the best reward she could have hoped for. After all that chaos, the chef takes the girls back to the restaurant to gossip about Atelier. Dennis thinks she's dating, and Vivia replies that they're still not sure about that. Henrietta asks if this makes our boy Dennis feel lonely, but he says that's not the issue. When the girl realizes the cook's whole agitation was because of that, she's relieved, as she thought he was furious with her and would kick her out of the restaurant. And Dennis just replies by asking how he could kick out someone who eats everything with as much pleasure as she does. Well, for now, at least. And the girl almost turned purple with fear from that threat. Just then, Atelier finally returns, and the entire restaurant goes quiet. She crosses the room and hands a gift to Dennis, saying she saved up to buy this jewel and asked for someone's help to buy it because it's the same color as his eyes. My God, look at that plot twist. Dennis is obviously over the moon, but when Henrietta almost blurts out that he was following the girl, Dennis threatens to ban her from the restaurant for real this time. Atelier then asks him to put on the bracelet. He does and suddenly feels like the happiest man in the world. Atelier's eyes shine with happiness, and I confess, mine did too. After that, she grabs onto his pant leg in a gesture full of love. Meanwhile, the scene changes, and to end our joy, we see that the bastard Vigo is going to a mansion to reunite with someone he hasn't seen in a long time.
The next day, after the last customers had left, Dennis stretched, relieved that his shift was finally over. He asked Atelier to clean up the outside area, but just as she was about to leave, another person entered the restaurant. The chef quickly announced they weren't serving anymore, but the man, dressed in a butler's uniform, paid him no mind. Instead, he dropped to his knees in tears in front of Atelier, calling out to her, "Miss Atelier." Dennis wondered what was going on, and Henrietta even grabbed her sword just to make sure it wasn't another creep with a thing for young girls. But the man quickly introduced himself as Stevens, butler to Atelier Workstat. Upon hearing that surname, Vivia and Basile's jaws dropped. Basile explained that House Workstat was simply the greatest family of mages in the kingdom, the very top of the magical world. Still sobbing, Stephen sat down, unable to believe that his lady had been reduced to waiting tables in a dive like this. Dennis was ready to kick the guy out, but the kids were dying to hear the story. Stevens began to explain he was the butler at the Workstat estate and was there to fetch Atelier at the request of the Royal Court of Justice. It turns out the girl's late father, Lord Famous, had a younger brother named Joseph who stole her entire inheritance by claiming she wasn't from the family's bloodline. And that's how the poor girl ended up cast out. But now, her father's will had come to light, and in it was made clear that Atelier was her rightful heir, entitled to all the family's wealth and power. The government validated the will, and for Stevens, it was time to expose Joseph's tyranny and restore the heir to her place. But after listening carefully to everything, Atelier flat out refused all that fortune, saying she had no interest in it. After all, she perfectly remembers the hell she went through because of all this, so it was obvious she didn't want anything to do with her uncle. Stevens fell into despair, which only irritated Dennis even more. Still, the cook admitted to himself that he was just a regular guy, and Atelier was the daughter of a wealthy family. He tried to understand if she really wanted to give everything up, and she finally said she would, on one condition: only if Dennis went with her. And obviously, our boy Dennis, also known as the best protagonist of the season, agreed. Vivia, perhaps getting a little too dressed up, decided to join the adventure, while Henrietta and Basile stayed behind to look after the restaurant. And then the star of the story, Atelier Works That, appeared, leaving her friends speechless in a gorgeous purple dress. She herself, however, was anything but happy. If it were up to her, she'd give anything to sort this out without having to return to the royal capital. But Dennis promised he'd stay by her side the whole time. Near the carriage, Stevens invited his lady and the rest of the rabble to climb aboard. Vivia just shrugged, admitting they really were the rabble. The journey began, and after long hours, they arrived in the capital. Vivia was eyes wide, completely smitten by the beauty of the enormous city, while Dennis told him to dial back the country boy act. And just like Atelier, the ex-adventurer never expected to set foot in that place again. After all, he had left from there too. Soon they arrived at a government building where they were greeted by Sestovich, the lawyer on the case. First, he explained they would need to examine Miss Atelier's blood. As soon as the poor girl saw the needle, she had the same reaction any kid would. In other words, she was scared to death. A man managed to gently draw the blood, but even so, Atelier nearly fainted. Sestovich invited her guardian for the next step, and Dennis left Atelier in Vivia's arms and went along. The lawyer explained that the former head of the family, Lord Famous, had a powerful hypnosis magic, a rare spell only certain bloodlines could wield. His brother, Joseph, eager to seize power, supposedly arranged for the couple's death and questioned Atelier's legitimacy, which got her thrown out. But Lord Famous was smart enough to leave a will, and because of it, the government ordered a new investigation to confirm Atelier's lineage.
The investigation would use a magical device that Sestovich showed Dennis, a room with a giant transparent sphere at its center. The lawyer placed Atelier's blood and then Lord Famous' blood into the sphere, which began to fill with crystals. If the pattern formed a flower, it meant they were first-degree relatives, and that's exactly what happened. Using the blood of Famous' wife, Lady Eliza, the result was the same, proving that Atelier was their daughter. The chances of winning the case were extremely high. Shortly after, before the court and the magic sphere, the judge announced the start of the trial. Joseph interrupted, his voice dripping with irony. Dennis, unbothered, replied that he didn't know him and condemned what he did to Atelier, promising that justice would be served. The judge told Mr. Dennis Blacks to shut up. Upon hearing the surname, Vivia instantly remembered the famous Blacks restaurant. Joseph's lawyer stood up and claimed that while Atelier was indeed Lord Famous' daughter, her mother wasn't Eliza, but rather a mistress of humble origins, making her ineligible to inherit the family's leadership. On the other hand, Sestovich promised to prove Atelier was Eliza's daughter using the magic sphere. However, Joseph remained oddly confident. With a smirk, he declared, "A mistress's child is a mistress's child. This is a waste of time." For a new test, a doctor collected more blood from the girl. The judge initiated a lottery to choose who would activate the sphere, hoping to avoid any foul play. And who was chosen? The butler, Stevens. He approached the sphere and, following instructions, first added Atelier's blood, then Lord Famous' blood. As expected, a flower formed, confirming the bond between father and daughter, much to Dennis's relief. Next, they added Atelier's blood again, but this time with Lady Eliza's. At first, a flower even began to form, but for some reason the pattern distorted, showing that the two were not mother and daughter. Joseph could barely contain his joy, mentioning that he told them so, while Sestovich insisted there must have been a malfunction and requested another test, but the judge refused. Triumphant, Joseph proclaimed that Atelier was the result of his brother's weakness for a mistress and could not inherit the family's fortune. And Atelier once again is feeling exposed and humiliated before this circus of rotten people. The judge declared that part of the will was invalid. In other words, the wealth and power would stay with Joseph, while the knowledge and books would go to Atelier. And that's when Dennis notices something strange in Stephen's hand. He stood up, walked towards the butler, grabbed him by the collar, and lifted him off the ground. A bloodied cloth fell, revealing a cut on Stephen's hand. Dennis accused him of mixing his own blood into the test to sabotage the results. Stevens broke down and confessed that Joseph had promised him his old position back if he helped. Overcome with rage, the chef unleashed the power that severely injured the butler. The judge ordered Dennis back to his seat, but he picked up 2 sticks from the floor, proving there was no marked stick in the lottery, and that the whole thing was rigged for Stevens to be chosen. With the truth exposed, he accused Joseph and his cronies of dragging Atelier through hell once again. And just like her protag, I'm also doing somersaults of anger over here. The guards rushed Dennis, but the ex-adventurer, consumed by fury, swore to burn everyone who hurt the girl. However, Vivia grabbed him from behind, begging him to think twice, because if he attacked now, he'd be branded an enemy of the realm, and likely thrown in prison. And if that happened, Atelier would have no one left. Realizing what truly was at stake, Dennis controlled himself. After all the chaos, Sestovich said Dennis's conduct in court would be overlooked. As for the rest, the lawyer pointed out that, regardless, the knowledge and books of House Workshop were still in the girl's hands, so it was worth taking a look. And right after, Dennis, Atelier, and Vivia went to the family's book repository, which was abandoned and full of cobwebs and rats. Inside, Atelier accidentally stumbled upon a hidden chamber beneath the floor. Once inside, Vivia and Sestovich were shocked by the books they found. Chronicles of the First King, Jungfrey, research logs of the King of Strange Devices, Yuzot, works so rare they shouldn't even exist anymore. In short, this small secret library was home to treasures that could shake the world. Seeing this, Sestovich wondered if, in the end, Lord Famas hadn't intended for Atelier to inherit these things all along. Dennis laughed, calling it a masterstroke, and asked what the girl planned to do with the treasure. She asked for all the books to be brought to the restaurant so everyone could have access to them. Vivia freaked out, unable to believe she was going to treat a piece of the world's cultural heritage like they were just magazines. The next day, the cook was waiting for Vivia and Atelier to leave the capital, but the young mage overslept and was running late. On his way, he passed a man in a cape and top hat who looked exactly like Dennis, but the energy he gave off was completely different. Not far from there, Dennis was shouting for Vivia to hurry up, and the man in the top hat, overhearing, commented on how beautiful the boy's name was. The boy thanked him and said goodbye. And when a girl named Fiorenza asked the man, whose name was Heath, who that was, he replied that it was a companion of his counterpart, the one he had mentioned before. The next day, the line to get into the restaurant nearly wrapped around the block. Inside, while enjoying their meal, Henrietta and Vivia were amazed to see so many mages and scholars who were drawn in by the books Atelier had inherited. Speaking of which, a mage opened one of those books and realized it was part of the definitive collection sought after by the greatest living sorcerers, while another was shocked to find the Necrophonico. Seeing how excited the guys were, Dennis made it clear he didn't mind them reading while they ate, as long as they left once they were finished. Suddenly, while the chef was busy with a flood of orders, a customer finally worked up the courage to approach him and say that he might be able to cure his wife's illness by studying the complete works of Mongolmore. Hearing this, Dennis called Atelier, saying there was a man in trouble. Hearing the plea, Atelier agreed to lend him the book so he could try to save the love of his life. But when others saw the man leaving with the book, 3 more asked if they could take some home too, and Dennis shut that down on the spot. This was a one-time exception. With the book in hand, the desperate husband thanked them from the bottom of his heart and left.
Moments later, more customers poured in, shouting their orders directly at the chef. Even with dozens of requests coming in at once, he remembered every single one. And more impressively, he unleashed his magical abilities at full force, working the kitchen at lightning speed. Vivia asked if it was really okay for him to burn through all his spells at once, and he replied that there was simply no other way to keep up. Seeing his skill in action, Atelier could only watch, mouth wide open, enchanted by the situation. The scene changed, and we now have a flashback to an old memory of a small abandoned child wandering the rainy streets. This child had no protection except for a ragged cloak and was forced to eat scraps of meat left on the ground. Soaked and shivering, she sat there, left to her own fate. At that moment, a woman passing by dropped her wallet, and the child just picked it up and returned it. Moved by the boy's kindness, she took him to the restaurant where she worked to eat something. He was so miserable he didn't even know how to hold a spoon properly, but the moment he tasted the food, it was as if his whole world exploded, and he couldn't stop eating, with tears streaming down his face. Back in the present, Dennis woke up after fainting. He tried to get up, his body burning with fever, but the kids stopped him. He worried about the restaurant, but Bahol said he couldn't stress about that in his condition, especially since they had already closed for the day. Dennis apologized and lay back down, and Atelier placed the ice bag back on his forehead. The chef asked why she looked so sad, and Vivia explained that she was dying of worry, afraid he'd kicked the bucket or something like that. Dennis gave a faint chuckle and assured her it was nothing major, then drifted back to sleep. Meanwhile, the others, although they knew why the chef had collapsed, were still worried, so they tried to think of a way to help. Bahol suggested making some rice porridge, and everyone liked the idea. Henrietta, the most enthusiastic of them all, put on a full suit of armor so she wouldn't get burned at the stove. Thinking about the ingredients, she grabbed a huge piece of meat and could only imagine it perfectly grilled. While Vivia, on the other hand, wondered at what point this airhead had forgotten they were making porridge. Unbothered, the indebted warrior grabbed a huge cleaver to chop the meat, something that was, at the very least, excessive. So much so that Vivia rushed to stop her from destroying the entire restaurant. Bahol then entered with a bucket of ice for Atelier and stumbled upon the chaos. And in the middle of the chaos, Sestovich, who was in the area, heard the commotion from outside and burst into the restaurant to see what was going on. In Dennis's room, Atelier checked his temperature. It was still high. Somehow, the poor girl blamed herself for his exhaustion. After all, he had poured out every ounce of his strength in that courtroom to save her. Because of Dennis, she was given a second chance at life. Back in the past, a man shouted that Dennis wouldn't get away with his shenanigans this time. Hanging from a window like a monkey and dressed as a cook, the boy protested that he was only helping in the kitchen, then jumped down and bolted. The woman who had taken him in came to ask what happened, and the assistant explained the kid was up to his tricks again. This time he had messed with the cabbage the cook had prepared, chopping it into even smaller pieces. One day, Dennis came running in, grinning from ear to ear, after finally managing to make fried rice with each grain perfectly separate. Carefree, Dennis looked around, wondering what to do with his prized creation. That's when a customer commented on how good it smelled. Excited, Dennis offered her a taste, but the moment she tried it, she almost spat it all out right there. In seconds, several staff members rushed to help, until the head chef herself appeared. She quickly found out that Dennis had given something questionable to the customer. Taking the fried rice from the boy, she cast a quick spell on the dish and served the same portion back to the woman. The lady, still suspicious, hesitated, but this time her eyes lit up with delight. The chef explained that her apprentice had simply forgotten to add a crucial ingredient. Later, Dennis approached her like a guilty puppy, and she took the moment to reinforce the importance of using the right kind of magic. Dennis started to cry, and she comforted him, saying he needed to study more, but also to listen to people. After promising he would, he asked how she had managed to save the dish. She said it was child's play for her. After all, she was known as the legendary fried rice master, and added that he could be one day too. Back in the present, Vivia asked why Sestovich had shown up. The lawyer admitted he was a magic fanatic and had come to read one of the volumes Atelier had inherited. But right now, helping Dennis was more important. So the man asked what they planned to cook, and Henrietta, with sparkling eyes, replied, "Rice porridge." Hearing this, Sestovich declared it was time to cook the rice, to the kids' amazement. Like a wise hermit from the mountains, he explained that once you have perfectly cooked rice, the real making of rice porridge begins. The real discussion, he said, should be about which magic to use to prepare the finest rice possible. Before going into law, Sestovich was a passionate researcher, so he knew these things. Bajo, being a mage, joined in, pointing out that one should use fire magic, but the problem was consistency. Sestovich proposed using the spectral fire produced by a ghost flame. Vivia warned that the ghost flame had one drawback: it wouldn't produce the crispy golden crust at the bottom of the pot. Not wanting to lose that crunchiness, Bajo suggested combining the two magics, but Vivia strongly objected. Sweating, Sestovich admitted they had reached a dead end. Still, Vivia wasn't ready to give up and suggested using a pot imbued by alchemists with magical catalysts to force the temperature to remain constant. Bajo almost cried, realizing this might be their only choice. In the end, Sestovich had the answer. They would use both magics and counteract the unstable heat with the catalyst-infused pot. That way, they would cook the most delicious rice the world had ever seen. With that decided, the next question arose: how to use magic to turn that rice into perfect porridge. Henrietta, exhausted by the debate, just wanted it all to be over. Luckily, Vivia and Bajo called for a break. At that exact moment, the octopus man entered the restaurant, having heard the chef was ill. He brought a catalog with a magical rice cooker, a device capable of making excellent rice with the crispy crust, and he was offering it at half price. As if that wasn't enough, this model had a special porridge mode. Henrietta asked if it would work without flames, and he just stared at her. Why on earth would anyone cook the rice first and then make porridge? You just boil water, throw in the raw rice, and voila, porridge. Hearing this, the three mages wished they could disappear into the floor. In any case, they threw all the complicated plans in the trash and decided to buy the magic pot. Atelier came in to say Dennis's fever had gone down, which made Henrietta happy. Knowing what her friends were making for him, Atelier suggested adding eggs to the recipe to make it even more nutritious. Her friends praised the little girl's cooking skills. After all, she had learned a lot from the chef. According to Atelier, you should whisk an egg as if you were slicing it. In a side conversation, Henrietta, with her usual confidence, declared that she didn't like eating leather shoes. While Bajo almost cried with sadness, Vivia asked if she was really saying she eats shoes. Henrietta explained that yes, her family used to eat them. Her father claimed that leather shoes were made from animal skin. Hearing this, Bajo felt sorry for her friend, while Vivia decided it was best to drop the subject. Later, Dennis woke up to find Atelier entering the room with a bowl of egg porridge in her hand. The moment he tasted it, the cook felt the same warmth he had experienced when he was taken in by the head chef at Black's restaurant. When he complimented the flavor and asked if she had made it, Atelier blushed and smiled and explained she had whisked the eggs exactly the way the chef had taught her. Then she added that the porridge itself had actually been made by the octopus, instantly shattering the cute moment and leaving the cook in a panic.
The next day, Henrietta was happily skipping through the market streets. A little further ahead, the girl met Vivia and proudly showed him the luggage she was carrying. According to her, she was so excited about today's celebration that she decided to come fully prepared. One of the merchants stopped them and joked that it was unusual to see the two of them out at lunchtime instead of at Dennis's restaurant, and they explained that the adventurer's restaurant would be closed for a while because of a special date. The scene changed, and back at the establishment, Dennis found Michelle and Atelier with their bags packed. Noticing Atelier's outfit, he commented that she didn't really need to wear that for the trip, but she seemed unwilling to change. Henrietta and Vivia soon arrived, and Dennis announced that it was time to leave. But before setting off, Henrietta wanted to make sure everyone had brought towels. Everyone nodded. Next, she asked about soap, and everyone showed theirs, then buckets. And finally, before the party, it was time for everyone to take a bath. So the group gathered to wash up, and Vivia was dumbfounded by Dennis's physique, who looked like a Mr. Olympia. Grinning, Dennis declared that this is what a man should look like. On the other hand, he questioned why the boy was so scrawny, to which Vivia replied that it was fine, he was a mage after all. Besides, he simply couldn't understand how the chef had built so much muscle. Dennis revealed that the secret was doing 1,000 upside-down push-ups every day, which led Vivia to conclude that this man was definitely not human.
Leaving that aside, the cook asked why the boy wasn't towel-free, as any normal person would be in a public bath. Clearly embarrassed, Vivia tried to cover himself, but the chef wasn't going to let him off easy, and even tried to yank the towel away from him. Meanwhile, the girls were enjoying a peaceful and friendly atmosphere. Later that day, Dennis prepared a large plate of snacks for the group and served the drinks. Now, the main event of the evening could begin. The chef put Henrietta in charge of the opening speech. Caught by surprise, the poor girl panicked. He argued that she was the only Henrietta at the table, and so trembling, she began by thanking him for gathering everyone there despite his tiring routine. Dennis laughed, saying she sounded like a robot, which only made her more embarrassed. She continued, this time with tears in her eyes, admitting that she had a great debt to the chef, but was happy to have finally found a job with a knight's order. Vivia joked that the freeloader could finally start paying what she owed. Then, the mage himself announced that he had found another group of adventurers. They weren't as famous as his old companions, but it was an important step for him to become a great wizard. Henrietta teased that he could now also pay his debt to the restaurant, but Vivia protested, refusing to be compared to a moocher since he always paid for his meals, unlike her. To wrap things up, Michelle stood up and revealed that she had decided to return home and become a teacher at the Royal Capital's magic school. With everyone sharing their news, Dennis made a toast to celebrate the group's growth. It was time to eat, drink, and dream of the future while enjoying the present. Watching Atelier unintentionally intimidate Michelle by insisting that the almost raw meat was cooked enough, Vivia commented to Dennis that the two seemed to have become great friends. At that, the mage sighed, lamenting that things would get lonelier from now on. Henrietta even considered postponing her new job, but Dennis reminded them that now they had the chance to do what they always wanted and shouldn't throw it away. Henrietta got so motivated that she declared she would leave town the very next morning, making everyone burst into laughter. As the night went on, Dennis prepared another feast using his level 99 magic. Soon a generous portion of fried rice was served to each of them, when suddenly Polvo appeared, helping himself to a plate. Drawn by the irresistible aroma, the merchant explained that he couldn't stay away. Dennis recognized him as that suspicious vendor, but got annoyed for forgetting his name. When Atelier reminded him it was Polvo, the man celebrated and even took the chance to invite the girl to work at his shop again. Dennis smacked him on the head, warning him not to bother her. But since it was thanks to Polvo that Dennis had tasted that egg porridge, he decided not to beat him up. Finally, he asked what the sly merchant was doing there, to which the repugnant sir begged not to be called sly in front of Atelier, and explained that he came to offer a banquet only he could provide, a piece of level 5 Hagen meat. Grinning at the merchant's generosity, Dennis pulled out 2 razor-sharp kitchen knives and accepted the challenge. Moments later, the slab of meat was tossed high into the air, and the chef sliced it into dozens of perfectly measured pieces, which went straight to the fire and were served to the boys, who somehow managed to feel even more satisfied. Feeling left out, Polvo grumbled that his idea was to offer the meat only to Atelier. By the way, the girl put a piece of meat in Dennis's mouth, and the merchant admitted he was jealous. Seeing this, she did him the same favor, and the big guy almost fainted from pure joy. Sometime later, while Polvo was asleep, Vivia finally asked the question he'd been holding back for so long. In court, they had called him Dennis Blacks, so the mage wanted to know if the chef was related to anyone from the Blacks restaurant. The man explained that the surname belonged to the head chef, his adoptive mother, but he didn't want to use it anymore, not after storming out after a nasty fight when he was close to level 90. Looking back, Dennis admitted he was full of himself, and his mother only tried to keep him grounded. He continues, saying that he was sure he would soon reach level 100, which is why he left the Blacks restaurant to show off to his adoptive mother. Then, one day he joined Silver Wing, the place he stayed the longest. However, the reality is, Dennis never reached level 100. The scene then changed, and meanwhile, in the city, 2 of our protagonist's most loyal customers were on their way, debating which dish to order. But to their surprise, they were greeted by a sign. The place was closed. At that moment, a pair of imbecilic troglodytes passed by them, and one of them pushed one of the girls. Her friend turned to demand an explanation, but the guy simply flashed a knife and walked off with arrogance. Not about to let that slide, the sorceress summoned the Guardian of Dawn and fired a magic arrow straight into the thug's backside. As he stumbled, her friend followed up with the Pit of Ramon's spell, knocking the guy down. Suddenly, something bad happened, and flames erupted from the alley where the men came from, right next to the restaurant. By this time, Dennis and the kids were on their way back, more than satisfied with the feast. From a distance, they saw the fire near the restaurant, and Dennis bolted ahead, his heart in his hand. When he arrived, the worst was before his eyes. The adventurer's restaurant engulfed in flames. Desperate, the chef looked for a way to put out the fire, while the two mages pinned down the culprits and identified them as members of the Night Mist troupe. One of them shouted that Dennis and his crew deserved it. The other added that the works that house was with them, all ready to crush the chef. Later, Dennis stood silently looking at the ashes of the place he loved. The memories of every happy moment came rushing back, and the cruel truth sunk in. Everything was gone. Even the rare books that Atelier had inherited were reduced to dust. And dudes, this is so sad and it makes me so angry. My desire to see the enemies reduced to dust went through the roof. Henrietta broke down in tears, while Vivia blamed himself for the tragedy. Bichelle also felt guilty, but Dennis said that it wasn't their fault. Honestly, he hadn't expected Silverwing to be part of this. He believed that Joseph Workstad must have sought out Vigo to form the alliance. In the face of it all, Dennis took full responsibility. Vivia tried to cheer him up, but Dennis seemed tired of more battles. He said he'd rather open a small restaurant in another town. Henrietta couldn't believe he was backing down. The truth is, he once thought he was strong enough, but look where that got him. With a smile, probably of disgust, Dennis ended the conversation. Still not giving up, Vivia pressed him. Why was he acting so differently? The Dennis he knew would take on the whole kingdom to protect Atelier. Calmly, he replied that he had simply cooled his head. Then he disappeared into the night with Atelier, leaving Vivia shouting after him. As he climbed to the second floor, Dennis took comfort in the fact that at least the safe had survived. Atelier asked if he was really going to accept this, and he replied that it was the best thing to do, as every action has a consequence, and if he chose to fight back, an even harsher reaction would follow, one that could very well lead to someone's death. Outside, Vivia, Henrietta, and Bichelle stood before the charred remains, unable to accept the end. That's when some suspicious-looking men began to approach the trio. Then Atelier asked if she could follow Dennis on his new journey, and the answer was obvious. He reminded her that Joseph only came after him because he interfered with his plans, which meant the chef owed her an apology for her books being burned. But Atelier assured him it was fine. She could handle that. What she couldn't stand was seeing the chef sad. Dennis explained that sometimes sadness was unavoidable, and then looking out, he commented that this city was a really good place. They bumped fists in a gesture of affection, and the cook promised that one day, when things had settled down, they would come back.
Outside, Vivia and the girls, confused, find Dennis and Atelier on their way out, but they are blocked by a crowd with serious faces. Bechel says they won't let him sneak out, and Henrietta calls him a coward. Vivia explains why everyone is gathered there in the middle of the night. Dennis is the kind of person who can't stand to see others get hurt, but doesn't care if he gets hurt himself. They shout that they care about him, and that if he's sad or hurt, they feel it too. They are all outcasts and are ready to be cast out again if needed, but not now, because many people want him to stay. The girls say his place is there, and even Polvo appears, saying no one dares to hurt his atelier and get away with it. The loyal customers, and even some soldiers he doesn't remember, also show up to offer their support. Seeing all this, Dennis feels like an idiot. He who always told others to hold on to what is precious was about to abandon his own dream. At that moment, Atelier tugs his shirt, and when he sees the look in her eyes, he drops the bag and decides to give it a shot. Everyone cheers, and he says that, after all, he doesn't want to be seen as a coward. To make it official, they decide on a team name, and Atelier suggests Outcasts Restaurant. Dennis finds the name a little rough, but admits it suits them quite well. As the leader, he declares that they and the townspeople will crush their enemies and ensure justice is served. But then Vivia asks what the plan is, and Dennis freezes up. That's when Katie appears, apologizing on behalf of her party. Hours earlier, she overheard Captain Vigo planning the arson with the Night Mist troop. She ran as fast as she could to warn Dennis, but arrived too late. Dennis reassures her and asks about Vigo's next plans. Katie, feeling guilty as the vice captain of Silverwing, can't help directly, but she tells him a secret. All the big shots in the capital will gather for a huge banquet. The next morning, the group heads to the capital. On the way, Dennis shocks the team with a fact. His adoptive mother and head chef at Black's restaurant, Jean Black's, is level 100. The gang is stunned. Vivia explains that the limit for normal people is 60, and reaching 100 is something that goes in the history books. Dennis, however, explains that she reached that level only through cooking skills, being much weaker in battle than him, but that no one is better in the kitchen, and she has countless connections with powerful people. Arriving in the city, they disguise themselves and split up to execute the plan. Vivia, Beshel, Henrietta, and Polvo use their connections to spread information and gather allies among mages, sages, and merchants. Meanwhile, Dennis arrives at Black's restaurant. He hesitates at the door, remembering the nasty fight he had with his master before leaving, but enters anyway. The staff recognizes him and welcomes him back warmly. The reunion with his master, Jean, is emotional. He asks why she's smiling, and she says he looks much better than when he left. He regretfully admits that she was right about him never hitting level 100. Knowing he didn't return without a reason, she asks what he wants. Dennis tells her about the villain's banquet and asks only for the date and location, something that would be easy for her to get. She asks what he plans, and he declares he will do the worst thing a cook can do. Jean, who always saw him as a boy who fired himself up to help others, but gave up when he himself was in trouble, asked what made him take such a drastic measure. The words of his friends echoed in his mind, and he replied that he's doing it all for the people who love his cooking and his dream restaurant. This makes Jean smile. She agrees to help, but says there's still one thing she never told him, the secret to reaching level 100. Later, Dennis leaves, scratching his head, shocked at how simple the secret was. With the information in hand, he gathers the gang and says it's showtime. Meanwhile, at a mansion, the four villains, Joseph, Vigo, Captain Hopper, and the royal court's judge, toast to their success. Joseph, more arrogant than ever, brags that he will soon rule the kingdom from the shadows. Vigo, in turn, smiles, imagining how he will use all of them as stepping stones to become the true hero of the nation. Suddenly, a waiter enters. Vigo is furious at the interruption, but the pompous Joseph allows him to serve the final dish. From under the cover, a blinding light reveals simple fried rice. Disappointed, they dismiss the waiter, but Joseph tastes it and is shocked at how good it is. The others try it and are equally amazed. Joseph orders the chef to be summoned, offering him the honor of working for him. And when the chef enters, taking off his disguise, he reveals himself. It's Dennis, who rejects the offer and declares it's time for them to pay for what they did. Joseph tells Vigo to do something, but Dennis calmly says he will take them all down. He then unleashes his intimidation skill, a shout so powerful that it brings the villains to their knees, terrified. Joseph offers him anything, and Dennis demands he admit his crimes. Trembling, the scumbags confess that they used Silverwing and the Night Mist Troop to burn down the restaurant. At that moment, Dennis asks Vivia if he recorded everything, and the boy who was using wind magic to broadcast the conversation across the entire capital replies that it was loud and clear before jumping out the window. Vigo, shocked, looks outside and sees all the powerful nobles who were dining below and heard every single word. With a big smile, Dennis welcomes Vigo to his temporary new restaurant.
Vigo can't believe his eyes. All the royal mages came to the party, and as the crowd starts gossiping, wondering if what they heard was true, Joseph and the others begin to sweat. The people are outraged that they destroyed a restaurant with the most valuable magic books in the nation, and shocked that the royal judge himself was involved. Dennis, proudly, says that it's the mages who maintain the law in their country, so he won't need to judge the gang of villains himself, because the law will do it for him. After that, Vivia and the girls start celebrating, and Cestapitch declares that the entire town heard the confession loud and clear, telling everyone to leave the rest to him. He then compliments the gang on a job well done. At the same time, Dennis tells Vigo he finally got what he deserved, which makes the man so pissed that he blasts a massive hole in the wall. Dennis jumps down and warns everyone to run, as the captain flies into the air and lands near him, looking like he's ready for a brawl. Vigo says he knew Dennis would get in the way of his plans one day and that kicking him out wasn't enough. He looks Dennis dead in the eyes, a powerful aura forming around his sword as he says he'll try to make his death as painful as possible. Dennis welcomes his offer and summons his cleavers as well, before the two men leap at each other to start the throwdown.
The brawl begins head-on, and after being forced back, the captain stomps the ground, creating rising rock islands. As Dennis jumps between them, Vigo sends a barrage of rocks that manage to cut his arm. Our protag then pulls out a frying pan as a shield and fires off a burst of flames. As soon as he lands, Vigo dashes at him, and Dennis can barely block the overwhelming power of his former captain. At that moment, he remembers when Katie introduced them. Vigo had laughed at him when he saw he was just a chef. That ticked Dennis off, and the two stared each other down until Katie broke them up, convincing the captain that Dennis's food would be crucial for motivating the party. And that's how Dennis joined. In flashbacks, we see how dedicated Vigo was to getting stronger, always pushing himself in training, and how impressed Dennis was with his hardworking nature, although Vigo was annoyed by the chef's carefree attitude. Their philosophies were different. Vigo believed they needed to go above and beyond to be the hunters instead of the hunted. Back in the present, the two seem to be evenly matched until Vigo attacks with a skill that shatters Dennis's cleaver to bits. He instantly recognizes the contact destruction skill and jumps back, because one hit would turn him to dust. He boosts his senses and finally starts taking the fight seriously. Vigo, curious, asks why he's trying so hard now, and says that Dennis may act like he's changed, but he's still nothing more than a brat adopted by a kind-hearted rich lady. With that, he attacks again. Dennis traps him with giant frying pans, but Vigo breaks them easily. To buy time, Dennis summons a pan right under Vigo, but the captain slices through it. The two clash head-on once more, but Dennis is forced on the defensive. He realizes he can't win like this and uses a green crystal that covers the entire place in a thick fog. Vivia realizes the difference between level 99 and 100 is massive, but Bachl is amazed at how Dennis is still able to keep up. And just as Atelier gets worried, she sees Dennis's body fly through the air. In that instant, with his senses boosted, everything feels like slow motion. He hears Vivia and the girls cheering him on with all their hearts. He realizes he needs to do something, but he knows Vigo is simply too strong. He wonders what he's even doing here, thinking he could have chosen a peaceful life, but then he remembers his real reason for becoming a chef. Not just to make a delicious dish, but to pass on the warm feeling that food once gave him. To give energy to those going through tough times. As he remembers his real goal is to protect their smiles, his consciousness slowly drifts away, until the voices of the outcast restaurant snap him back to reality. As Atelier yells at him to win, Vigo charges for the final blow. At that moment, Dennis remembers his master's secret to reaching level 100. Stop thinking of it as the final destination. Happiness, like in the story of the Blue Bird, was at home all along, in his heart. And right before Vigo's final strike lands, Dennis finally understands. He confidently blocks the attack and a tornado of flames erupts from his body. The gang stares in awe at the nuclear aura blazing around him. Dennis realizes he could never grow stronger by doubting himself, and swears he will become the #1 chef who will protect everyone's smiles. As Vivia and the others realize he just hit level 100, Dennis charges at Vigo with his butcher knives, ready for the slaughter. He dives onto the captain, and the sheer force pushes him into the ground. Then, Dennis yells that he is banned from his restaurant as he activates a skill called Forced Eviction, which crushes him with unstoppable gravity. The captain wonders why he can't move and realizes his armor is crumbling like used tissue paper. Vivia guesses it must be Dennis's unique skill that he unlocked upon reaching the max level. Watching from a distance, Jean is also impressed by her student's unique skill. Meanwhile, Vigo gets a taste of the force that defies the laws of physics and thinks that the skill's name is really cringe. When the skill is finally over, Dennis pants in exhaustion and looks inside where the former captain lies, completely destroyed. Before he can fall back, the outcast party grabs him from behind and congratulates him on the win. But Dennis says he's really tired and asks them to get someone to make him fried rice. Hearing that, Henrietta and the others agree to make it with their own hands, and Vivia says they should celebrate with a fried rice party. This makes Dennis seriously worried, and he begs them not to mess up the rice like the last time. Then Atelier walks up to him and hands him the bracelet. The chef thanks her for taking good care of it. After that, the little cutie holds out her fist and smiles gently at him. Looking for a fist bump, the two share a wholesome moment, and Jean quietly leaves, seeing that he doesn't need her anymore. After that, all the culprits are arrested. Vigo's annihilated body is recovered from the massive crater. Seeing that, Katie breathes a sigh of relief. Later, she joins Jean for a meal and asks why Dennis was suddenly able to level up. The head chef calls her the new captain of the Silver Wing Battalion and says that the secret to reaching level 100 is to find your purpose in life. Katie realizes it's a wild coincidence that two chefs with completely different goals like her and Dennis were born in the same era. While Jean became a master of cooking, he became the strongest chef in the whole world, whose purpose was to protect everyone around him. Meanwhile, Master Heath enjoys a salad and asks his assistant Fiorenza if she wants to try it. The robotic girl refuses. She asks if he's fine with Vigo and Joseph Workstadt being arrested, but the man replies that's none of his concern. She shares that she was surprised Dennis was the one to take him down, but her master says that's no surprise at all. Dennis is his little brother after all. Back at the restaurant, Dennis gets angry at Vivia and the girls for teasing him while his wounds are still fresh. Vivia is impressed by how fast he recovered, and Henrietta straight up calls him a monster. Dennis starts to question if they came to check on him or to roast him. Then Bachl brings out a huge paper roll that turns out to be the new building plans that exactly match their restaurant. Dennis is overjoyed. Vivia says that Polvo used his contacts and they're more than glad to work on the new restaurant. Henrietta excitedly shares how hard they worked on the blueprints. Dennis melts with joy, but he notices the blueprints are a bit different. Bachl points out it would be a shame not to use this chance to renovate. Dennis is on board until he sees that the bath takes up over half the first floor. He freaks out at their unnecessarily extravagant ideas like an open seating area and a giant aquarium, which go against the cozy vibe he wants. Not long after, the royal magicians make everything Joseph and his gang did public, and they are all thrown in jail. And finally, the new restaurant was built at a monstrous pace, and the opening day has finally come. Vivia is taking a day off from adventuring to go to the relaunch, along with Henrietta, who's now in the Knights Order, and Bachl, who is now an instructor at the Royal Magic Academy. Back in town, Dennis is out shopping with Atelier. Suddenly, someone bumps into her and panic sets in as she realizes she got lost again, but that feeling instantly disappears when Dennis calls out to her. After that, Dennis puts up the Outcast restaurant sign. He wonders if people will really want to come to a place with such an unwelcoming name, but the gang hypes him up. Inside the sparkling new place, the team is a little disappointed that everything is as mid as it was before. Dennis says he never agreed to go along with their crazy blueprint. That makes Atelier grumpy because she really wanted the huge bath, but she cheers up when he pats her on the head and asks her to assist him as he gears up. After he takes their orders, Dennis locks in and serves some fire food that make them explode with delight. Seeing that, Dennis gives a heartfelt thanks to them for teaching him that he doesn't have to give up on things precious to him. At that moment, Halvo and the old regulars enter, and Dennis and the Outcast team give them a grand welcome. And with this fried rice party, the saga of Dennis comes to an emotional end. So, what did you guys think of the final battle and Dennis finally hitting level 100? And this happy ending with the reopening of the restaurant, wasn't it just the best? Let me know your opinions on the series in the comments, and smash that like button and the hype to support this video, and subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next projects here on the channel.